Hey guys, how are you? Hello, Broken Justice, support with Steffa. I'm sure there's Amanda Lee. How are you guys? Without Borders has to work late, so she won't be here. That's okay, Steffa. That's okay. Anyways, we have Hey Punksy, we have Jeff Mudgett here, and he wrote the book Bloodstains, and that book is 11 years old. And hello Megan, thank you for being here. I've got to get you back. I screwed up my, okay, I got you. I want to make sure I got you as a moderator. Anyways, that book is 11 years old. He's coming out with a revision, a revised vision of the Bloodstains book. And we are going to talk about a lot of things. I'm going to let Jeff take over. And then anybody that has questions, he loves questions. I know I have a lot of questions. Anyways, I'm going to read what Bloodstains, the book, those of you that don't know about it, but Bloodstains is the startling tale of one man's search for the truth after inheriting the personal diaries belonging to his great-great-grandfather, who he discovers was America's first and most notorious serial killer, Herman Webster Mudgett, also known as H.H. Holmes. He was the mass murderer who struck terror in the nation by being the proprietor of the infamous Murder Castle, and I've got pictures of that, and stalking the streets of Chicago during 1893 World Fair. During his incarceration awaiting execution well over a century ago, it's even longer than that though now, Holmes admitted killing 27 innocent victims. Jeff, the descendant of H.H. Holmes, I'll let you tell you, but he thinks there's been so many more. And Jeff is the direct descendant of H.H. Holmes. He learns that Holmes' reign of terror was worldwide and not limited to just Chicago, has been so widely believed. Based upon never before revealed historical facts, Jeff pieces together a dynamic and extraordinary puzzle, including the strong possibility that H.H. Holmes may be Jack the Ripper, the London serial killer. So I am going to bring Jeff up and we're going to talk to him. You guys, please make sure that we are respectful and he doesn't mind questions at all. And my mods, please don't let any trolls come in. There's been quite a few lately. Just get rid of them, block them, and I'll deal with it another time. So, okay, let's bring Mr. Mudgett up. Hello.
Hello, Allison. And, thank you for having me on the show. I love the title, True Crime Analyst. And let me first off apologize and tell everybody that slight delay we had was my fault. Allison was ready to go and I had trouble with the connection. So don't blame
it wasn't,
Allison.
no,
it was me.
It wasn't just you. I was having problems with my audio at first. So no, I always have a problem. I am not very good with technology at all. So I want to know, I want you to tell the chat a little bit about yourself and when you found out that you were H.H. Holmes's great-great-grandson. Just explain to yours and what the book, I want you to just tell your story.
It's, well, thank you for that. And it's, I found out who I was and where I came from. And this terrible man was my grandfather's grandfather is probably the easiest way to understand it. And I'd had this strange relationship with my grandfather all my life. We'd been standoffish. We'd never gotten along. We'd never gone fishing together, any of those things a grandson and his grandfather do. And then when he died, he left me, which I describe in my book, he left me a couple of fishing tackle boxes. When I was about 40 years old, I was practicing law in California, criminal trial law. And my father drove up one day and he said, "Hey, Grandpa left you these." While my dad and his brother were fighting over California real estate, I had these fishing tackle boxes, and I figured, that was a nice way for the old man to say goodbye. And but I never went to his funeral, any of those things. So they sat in the corner of the garage. And then one day, the dog and I were out in the garage, and we flipped them over and went through the contents, and lo and behold, in the bottom of one were a couple of old diaries.
Oh, wow.
And the diaries were from perhaps the most evil man in American history, H.H. Holmes, the Chicago master of the murder castle, which America and the world is going to be seeing a lot of now that the Hollywood giants have their hands on it, and are going to be producing a huge television series with some of the biggest stars there are. And it's, I just, so I got, I set aside everything, my career and all those things for a while. I became fascinated with this evil man who, to tell you the truth, Allison, I'd known I was different all my life. I mean, I was never evil. I was never wanting to kill anyone, any of those things. But I'd known I was evil. I had trouble with those things other men seem to just handle easily. And I knew there was something about that connection of mine, that genetic connection, which might answer some of my questions about myself.
And that's why you set out to write the book. You wanted to know more about yourself.
Well, I started out researching, investigating, doing, I started investigating all over the country, all over the world to see if any of the legend and lore about this terrible man was true. And, lo and behold, I started getting approached by television production companies and started doing TV shows. And then finally History Channel came up and told me they'd seen my TED Talk about my great-great-grandfather being Jack the Ripper and the evidence I'd put forth at the TED Talk. They were fascinated with it, and they wanted to know if I wanted to produce a television series with them about it. And we produced American Ripper. And that was 5 years ago, which, was watched by a couple million people sometimes on those episodes.
Well, tell them your book. How many books sold 11 years ago when your first book came out?
We sold, I think we sold 20,000 copies.
That's amazing.
It wasn't like a million bestseller or anything like that. It was my first attempt at a book. To tell you the truth, when I'm revising it now, I'm disappointed in some of my writing style back then.
Well, I can honestly say, Jeff, that I do not read. I mean, anybody that knows me, I can't sit down and concentrate enough to read a book, but I'll have my earpiece in, and I love audiobooks. I can get so much done doing that. So I cannot wait for that audio to come out, because tell them about that.
Well, right now, my revision, I'm working, it's almost finished. It's going to be, I've got a new website coming out. It's going to be called the Buck 29 Cafe. And I'll be offering to all my fans and followers for a limited time only, and your listeners too, if they're interested, a free download.
You're awesome. Thank you. You guys heard that.
And so they're welcome to take advantage of that. And then it's a great read coming out, because you're going to be seeing now that DiCaprio and Scorsese and Keanu Reeves and Hulu, I mean, they haven't picked who's going to play my great grandfather yet as the killer, I can't wait to see that. But
Well,
when they get going on that production and the writers, I saw some of the writers they've selected to perform each episode, and they're some of the best in Hollywood. It's going to be an amazing show to watch. And I know that once they start understanding the story a little bit, hopefully after reading the Bloodstains revision, they're going to see that this story we're talking about Jack the Ripper. We're talking about Holmes escaping prison. We're talking about Holmes starting a new life in California, those things which they're going to be able to run wild with if they choose to do so. And that's why I wanted to get the revision out. I want to go on shows like yours to fill in people about what's going on right now so that they can prepare themselves for, you're going to see people finally understand this wasn't a psychotic man. This wasn't a mentally ill man. This was a man who was born evil, who went to University of Michigan Medical School, who graduated with a doctor, who decided instead of taking care of people, he was going to murder. He was going to sell body parts. He was going to conduct experiments about him living longer, those Dr. Frankenstein things. And then one of the most amazing parts of his story, which I'm hoping Hollywood also jumps into, was he conducted his own murder trial, fired his lawyers, and conducted his own trial despite having never practiced law, which you can imagine someone like me, that's what I did for a living. I've gone over that trial transcript 10 times, and I'm amazed every time finding out something which that man shouldn't have known the tactics or techniques that a practiced trial lawyer would use. And he was an amazing fella, although horribly evil. And it's almost something we need to understand to know that kind of stuff exists. It exists then, it exists now, and it's going to exist again in the future.
Yes. And that's just it. All of us are here because of the true crime. And you're right. There's a difference between psychotic and just plain evil.
Yeah.
And he even admitted, what did he say?
He was born evil.
Yep, I was born with the devil in me. I could not help the fact that I was a murderer no more than a poet can help the inspiration to sing. I was born with the evil one standing as my I should have my glasses on. Anyways, beside my bed, my sponsor beside my bed, where I was ushered into the world, and he has been with me ever since. That personally come from H.H. Holmes. Ugh. Just it is. It's just so when did you find out that he was your great-great-grandfather?
I was about 40 years old.
Oh,
my
wow.
grandfather, he had been a very silent man. He was a very successful plant executive in California. He ran the PG&E plant on the California coast. Very successful, practiced professional. But as far as including any of us, his grandkids in his life, that was forbidden. And we never knew why. He never told my grandmother why. And one of the funny things I think you and your listeners will appreciate is my grandmother had this hobby of, she was into tracking her ancestry. She thought that we were related to a couple Civil War generals, and then even back farther than that into the American Revolution.
Oh.
So when the professionals that she'd put a lot of money into finally came to her, and I write about this in the book, and said, Mrs. Mudgett, this is something you want to take up another hobby. This isn't something you want to continue with because, your husband's grandfather, direct ancestor, was perhaps the most evil man in American history. And it's not something you're going to want to promote around the world, or especially America, that's who he was. I mean, Allison, during the 1890s, the Herman Webster Mudgett H.H. Holmes trial was the O.J. Simpson trial of the time.
Yep, it
Every
was.
major newspaper was there. The Hearst Corporation paid him $7,500 to give an interview while he was in prison.
And back then, what would that be nowadays? Million?
Couple hundred grand. Couple hundred grand. Yeah. There was a depression going on at the time. I mean, he was already wealthy. He had money in Chicago banks. So that every major newspaper was there following every move he made at that trial. And then the strange things he did in prison, and how the prison, I write about this also in the book, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to revise the book. These last 10 years, I've been involved in some incredible television productions with some amazing investigators and people spending a lot of money. I think history spent over $1 million exhuming the graves outside of Philadelphia to see if we could determine who was actually in that grave.
And did you guys get the DNA back for that? Because I know you guys did that quite a while ago, didn't you?
Oh yeah, we got the DNA back. Yeah.
Are you allowed to say?
It didn't match mine. We had History and I had issues about that, and they pretty much wanted out of the story. History was they were fantastic to work with. They some of the if you have ever watched American Ripper, and some of your listeners, the historic recreations they did about Holmes in London as Jack the Ripper were some of the best television ever produced. But that last episode, when it came down to going way out on the limb with me and telling the world, wait, this might be the most amazing fraud ever committed on the American criminal justice system and in American history. This isn't him. They didn't want to go that far. They'd been terribly scarred with the Amelia Earhart debacle. Remember that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And History was the one that said, hey, that hadn't been Amelia Earhart. This is her sitting on the pier, and then had to admit that they'd made a terrible mistake with that.
Yeah, so, well, we all know that there's corruption everywhere. I mean, it just is. Yeah. So you yourself do not believe he was executed?
Oh, he wasn't. He wasn't.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
No, and that's one of the most exciting parts about this whole Hollywood thing, Allison. You've got these great, incredible minds now with mountains of money. Okay, they're going to take a look at this. See, imagine this, Allison. Imagine if and Hollywood is Hollywood. They can do whatever they want with a story. We all know that.
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't National Geographic or the Smithsonian. This is Hollywood. But imagine if they decide, whoa, that wasn't him in that grave. He actually escaped execution, substituted a body, and then conducted the legendary Holmes curse, where numerous people suddenly died or disappeared.
Anybody that was involved.
That had been involved in his arrest and incarceration, and then went off to California to live another life.
Yeah.
And imagine that's 4 or 5 more episodes for them for that series. It's a fortune in extra money if they want to do it. And then they start realizing, wait, this story is all of a sudden more complicated than we thought. Let's take a second look at what Jeff's saying about Holmes being in London and writing the Dear Boss letter and being the murderer of Catherine Eddowes, at least one of the 5 victims.
I want to pull up the sketch of Jack the Ripper real quick and just show people how much the sketch of Jack the Ripper looked like H.H. Holmes. Right here. That was the sketch of Jack the Ripper. Now I'm going to pull up H.H. Holmes. I mean, you can tell. I mean, I agree with, I mean, it definitely the resemblance.
There's another one that the BBC did that's even closer than that to
Yeah.
him. And you know, the I'll be the first to admit the eyewitness testimonies of those that said they saw this killer in London are sketchy at best. It would have been hard to have proven a murder at any kind of trial, which required beyond a reasonable doubt. But I don't know if you remember, Allison, but what we did while I was researching who he was and the possibilities of this thing having this let's face it, Jack the Ripper is the most notorious killer in world history. I mean, he's the one. I knew that there were other people around the world investigating the possibility that Holmes had been Jack, but they were relying on these sketchy eyewitness testimonies.
Mm-hmm.
What I did, having had a couple of friends in law enforcement, I took the handwriting from the dear boss.
The paper that is that the it was on the Bloodstains. Can I pull that up?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to pull that up. So
yeah,
I think it's the right one.
And if your listeners want to get, yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
And if your listeners want to get the actual comparison, they can just pull my TED Talk up. It's on Google, and you can go through these comparisons. And we put them together quite closely. And then my friends in law enforcement and the FBI told me that there was an outfit at the University of Buffalo called Cedar Fox, who the FBI, the CIA, and Scotland Yard used to compare handwriting during true crime investigations. And I contacted them, and they were willing to help. So we took that, what you just put up, the Dear Boss letter, the most famous Jack the Ripper letter of them all, the one that signed Jack the Ripper.
I know I've got two different.
Yeah, and there you go, Jack the
yeah.
Ripper. And then we put up a couple of correspondence that Holmes had written himself. And you could, you know, a layman can see that it's the same handwriting, but that's obviously not enough. We sent it to this outfit that ran it through their computers, and they came back with a 97% similarity.
Wow.
Which, if you know anything about handwriting comparisons, it's almost impossible to get 100% off that computer. But they told me if we backed them up, if we provided them the funding to change the font program on their computer back to the 1880s, they thought they could even get a closer similarity. So, you know, we have that. And one of the most remarkable statements I've ever heard about that whole thing was there was a Fox local Chicago news reporter who was fascinated with this whole thing that this Jack the Ripper and this H.H. Holmes, Chicago's most killer, could possibly be the same. So he ran the handwriting comparison, and he said, you know, while he didn't want to agree with me that this coincidence was just too much for him in history and American science to buy into, he said, you've got to give Jeff credit on this, because we ran the numbers about what were the possibilities, what were the odds that this Jack the Ripper, UK, London's most notorious killer, and H.H. Holmes had the same handwriting. And the numbers they came back with were,
well, wasn't
outer space.
Wasn't H.H. Holmes in London at,
oh, yeah.
I mean, he was proven to be in London.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He was there. We think he was there looking into the business of selling body parts, which is what he did back here in the States.
And he didn't even need the money. He did not need the money. I'm going to show a picture of the murder castle real quick, in case nobody has seen it before.
No, go ahead.
That is the murder castle. there's him standing next to it. And this is all the areas, and you guys can find this on your own, but there was all sorts of different tunnels. And I mean, when he got married to your great-great-grandmother, he went to Michigan, University of Michigan, right? And he went to school.
She was his first. Yeah.
Yes. And then he divorced her. I don't know why he let her live, but he did, thank God. Or, he divorced her, and that was, he left, and he started working on building the murder castle. And
now that previous picture of yours, you need to be careful with that. I've never seen that one before. And I can tell you this, what's there now is the United States Post Office.
It's this right here, right?
Yeah, that's what's there now. And the murder castle would have been to the left, the left of that picture of the post office now, with the over the top of that tree.
And isn't part of the basement still there?
It borders, each border borders each other. And, I've been down there a couple of times. I write about it in my book.
And that's what I want you to tell the chat about. When you started writing the book, you wanted to go to the murder castle, the post office, and you went in there, and there's actually a video out there. But tell them how you felt when you got there and you went in.
Well, and your listeners should keep an eye on History Channel. Periodically, they rerun a show called Haunted History.
And I couldn't find it. I don't know why I couldn't find it.
One of my favorite episodes is when we went back down in the basement. So it's a good chance to see what's down there now in the post office. But the federal government bought that property. They tore down the murder castle without investigating what had happened there, despite knowing there had been murders there that had never been investigated or solved. And then they built that U.S. Post Office over the top, but barely over the top. They border each other. And then, so the books that had been written about the murder castle, the employees there all believed that the basement was haunted. None of them went down in the basement. Actually, it was barricaded. That first time I got permission to go down there, we had to clear off the door down the stairways. And it one of the things that I find most fascinating about what's happening now, Allison, and the interest shows like yours, and then can you imagine what Hollywood's going to do with what that murder castle's going to look like?
Yeah.
And the basement, and him working down there as Dr. Frankenstein and all these things. But you're going to see, I think you're going to see the world have a renewed fascination with what's really there. I think you're going to see somebody like DePaul University, one of the great true crime universities of American college or education, decide, wait, we got to go take another look. We can dig that up. We don't have to affect the post office operation at all. And we can go down to see if we can determine any evidence or DNA down there about the many, many women that went missing. That I'll be the first to admit, I can't prove how many he murdered there. The people that want to come on and argue with me about how many this terrible man killed, I just refuse to do it.
It would be impossible to know the exact number.
And you know what, Allison? There's never been this man, while his colleagues were at the University of Michigan learning to save lives, he was in the autopsy department learning how to dispose of human remains. He never saved a life in his career. He was there to learn, and he knew about eliminating the evidence of homicide perhaps more than anyone that's ever lived. And so then when people want to argue how many he murdered, 9, 13, 27, 54, 200, I don't know. don't know. But I'd love to see the federal government, and they own that property, and they had the responsibility to do it in the first place. Someone should go back into that property and do an archaeology and an anthropology.
Absolutely.
There might be someone there that deserves it.
Yeah. Jeff, a lot of the chat, they're into paranormal. A lot of my friends are that are in the chat. And tell them, when you first went into the basement, did you not tell them how you felt?
Well, and you know what? I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a major part of my revision for the book. The first time around when I wrote Bloodstains, I was hesitant. I wanted to try to prove to the world that he was Jack the Ripper. I wanted to try to prove to the world that he had escaped his execution and had substituted another body there. So I stayed away from some of the paranormal. Well, now I've decided I'm just going to tell everyone what I really thought at the time. When we first went down into that basement, Allison, I didn't believe in ghosts or goblins or ghouls in any way or shape or form, okay? I just thought that was ridiculous. But that first time down into that basement, there was an energy, there was a sense, there was a feel that I try to explain in the book. And it was scary. It was terrifying. And it had to do with when my grandfather died and my father brought me, what was left to me, those fishing tackle boxes. I suddenly developed a condition, a mental condition called epilepsy. I started having seizures. And during these seizures, I would hear voices, I would see visions, I would feel touches. And the doctors all told me, no, that's normal. That's very normal. That's what happens during the seizure. You were obsessed with this evil man. Your life was turned upside down. That's all you thought about. Very, very normal. We don't see anything like that at all. Well, one of the neurologists, a Dr. Mitchell from Stanford University, contacted me later and told me, wait, I'm not agreeing with my colleagues on that. There's something we need to look deeper into. There might be something that you sensed actually. And she and I did some work on that, and that's what the revision of the book is about. And it has a lot to do with the paranormal. It has a lot to do how some of the most successful ghost hunters in the paranormal world have that condition, sometimes sense these visions they have while having a seizure, but no one around them can see the same thing, and they're cast all these doubts and things. But I think it's a fascinating look at what might be more than what we've thought for so long, and I'm trying to explain it the best I can.
No, you're doing great.
Subject to write about.
You even seen yourself walking away, didn't you? Like moving, yeah. And now you are actually. I don't know if you still do it, but you work with young kids that have epilepsy, seizures.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, to help, because it is, is it an illness or is it something? Because from what I've researched, a lot of kids like with epilepsy, autism, anything like that, they actually can see things that some others can't, it's just, oh my.
It's not, I'm not here saying that I'm in any way intelligent like that. But when you research history and those before that have had that condition, you come up with these names that are shocking. You come up with Einstein, you come up with Edison, you come up with Van Gogh, you come up with some of the greatest writers that ever lived, you come up with Napoleon, you come up with Julius Caesar. Epilepsy is not something that we can just cast aside. It needs to be looked a little closer at. And I'm hoping that my, the revision of my book and the Hollywood series might help with that. We'll see. We'll see. It's not an easy subject to jump into.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you decided to go investigate your ancestry and figure out what exactly, what did your family think of that when you decided you wanted to know?
They didn't like it.
They didn't like it?
My father supported me the whole time. He's always been right behind me. My mother, it was a mother. She was going to accept my decision and be there for me. She didn't like it. My brother and sister hated it. And my cousins all thought it was a stain on the family that could have been left alone. And I could have done other things. But I'll tell you this. When we exhumed the body in Philadelphia, the judge there that had to grant permission, he decided that all of the family had to write off consent on that event. And if they didn't, he wasn't going to allow it. Well, they all agreed. They all decided to let me do it, despite many of them not wanting it at all. But they took the right path, and then we went into that, and it was looking back, I'm quite proud of the whole family, how they acted during the event.
Now, was it your grandfather that wouldn't allow his name to even be brought up ever?
No, he never brought it up. Never.
Yeah, he didn't want anybody.
No one in the family knew until I decided to investigate the books in the fishing tackle boxes.
So you went to your family, and your grandfather, he didn't want you even talking about this H.H. Holmes, right?
No,
yeah.
No. And the way he did that, Allison, was he didn't associate with any of his grandkids. That's the way he was. And I think it was because when you think about it, I think he knew he was different. I think he had edges to him. If we had a psychologist here on your show tonight, they might be able to help with this. How someone like that, knowing where he had come from and that close, was worried about what might have happened in his life. And maybe the thoughts he had during temper tantrums, things like that. I know I always realized I was different from some of my friends. And I think the way he protected himself on those thoughts, on the possibilities that something like that could have, I don't know how that would happen, but could have dominated his all of a sudden life. He just stayed away from it. He didn't read about it. He didn't talk about it. He didn't bring it up with the family. He decided to live his life as quietly as possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Might have been the best. Might have been.
Yeah. I guess it would be like, if I don't know what I would feel. I would have every emotion, I'm sure, if I found out that one of my descendants was so evil and killed people. You look at these different cases, that they're like Chris Watts or whoever, they seem so normal, and then they just snap or whatever they're doing. And what was his IQ?
I've never seen a number. I know that some of his classmates talked about him showing up 2 or 3 days before a test at one of their classes and him passing. He wasn't interested in top of the class stuff, but he wanted to get that degree.
Now, why do you think he picked Chicago, the World Fair? Is it because of all the different people that were going to be there from different cities and states? Nobody would.
Oh, it was world famous.
Yeah.
And there were millions of people there, fortunes spent. At some of the most successful Americans that had ever lived were part of it. And he was 2 miles down the road in this little Murder Castle hotel.
When they were building this Murder Castle hotel, when people like the construction company, did they not wonder why he was wanting all these different tunnels and rooms and things to be made?
Well, that'll be a big part of the Devil in the White City show, the television series.
Now, is that the one Keanu Reeves is going to play?
Yeah. Keanu Reeves is going to, from what I hear, I'm not connected with Hollywood, but from what I hear, he's going to, the book, when you read The Devil in the White City, which is a good book, Eric Larson wrote a good story, but it's 2 parts. There's a part about the architect that puts the fair together, which was an amazing event, amazing construction, maybe is equal to the pyramids, and then the other part of it is about my ancestor. So how Hollywood's going to pull that off, I don't know. They're going to find out as they dig into the story, Allison, that they're going to be shocked at how many city officials, the chief of police, the attorney general for Chicago, those things Holmes had associations with.
Wow.
He might have known this architect. I don't know.
Well, money talks.
But the man was, well, a con supreme. His career was conducting a murder or finding a body that he could use to substitute in for one already identified for a life insurance policy that he would collect on. And, at that time, he would collect $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 with New York life insurance companies that hired some of the greatest investigators in the world to prevent this from happening. Because, quite frankly, they knew something was going on with this guy, but he kept getting away with it. And that's what he would enjoy doing for a living, as well as selling skeletal parts. One of your listeners may enjoy this. When I was selling books, I was doing a lot of book signings. One Iowa show I had a professor come up and tell me that, he was the boss at one of the universities there. I don't remember the exact name of it. Maybe just the University of Iowa.
You said in Iowa?
Yeah.
It would either have been University of Iowa or Iowa State. Drake.
I remember him mentioning university.
Yeah, it was probably University of
But,
Iowa.
we shook hands and he said, I just want you to know that, I read your book and all that, and that the board and I decided that at our medical museum, there was a skeleton there. We were pretty sure the university had purchased from your ancestor.
Oh my God.
And that all of a sudden we knew we couldn't have that in the museum anymore, and they buried it properly.
Yeah, because he sold skeletons to a lot of universities, and
well, he might have murdered that young lady, the skeleton.
Yeah. Oh, he murdered. I mean, the documentaries and the stuff I've been reading, just awful. They thought that they were going to go stay in this hotel, and they never they never left. I mean, he even used gas chambers, didn't he? Or some kind of a gas.
Oh, the murders that he committed, Allison, very few were with a knife. Very few were with a gun. He would use gas. He would use poison, those things. And then he would send the body down to the basement where he and his assistants would prepare it for commercial benefit. But, down in that basement, there was a furnace, the high temperature furnace. There were chemicals which could dissolve flesh and bone. He had concrete, I don't want to say corporation, but maybe small companies along the river there in Chicago, where if you remember the American Ripper at all, we did one show where we were investigating the river along downtown Chicago. And we found concrete blocks that couldn't be identified by law enforcement. When we asked history if they would fund us dredging those up, and then, breaking them open to see if we could determine if there were bodies inside from that time period. History decided not to. They were way over budget on American Ripper, and you know what? They did, and I understand all that. They did a great job, and they spent a lot of money. But at another book signing there, the mayor, Rob Emanuel, his chief of staff came over to me and he goes, he said, the mayor and I were watching American Ripper and we never did figure out why you guys didn't come and ask us permission. We would have said yes for you to dig up those concrete blocks. We were not dying. They were interested to find out what was really there. It might have just been concrete blocks. I don't know. But they had the shape of a coffin.
Yeah, I read where everybody was so scared when they supposedly executed him. They buried him like in 10 foot of concrete or something. They claimed. It's just, people were scared.
That exhumation was, I'd like to have someone help me go through it again and have me detail what I think we found instead of what History Channel decided we found.
Yes.
Because I don't agree with their conclusions at all. I know we found there were 2 graves there that Holmes had purchased, 2 graves. The first one was an empty coffin at 8 feet, filled with a clay-like material. One of the artist depictions from one of the newspapers had a coffin, this similar shaped coffin, this plywood shaped coffin with this clay-like mold material shaped into the hump of a body there. You couldn't see face or hands or feet, but you could see that there was something there that could have been a body. Well, when we dug it up, it was empty. There was no body. Oh my
gosh.
Yeah, and everyone there except me was just blew it off, and I'm like, whoa, you guys are kidding me. We found an empty coffin there. Oh, but that doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean anything. Let's get to the other one. And I said, well, all right. So we moved over to the other one, just right next to it, and we dug down 2 feet deeper, and we found that concrete sarcophagus you described, that the body had been encased in this almost, at the time, which would have been impregnable block of concrete, which Holmes had a fascination with. And the story went with some of the writers, some of the authors that had written books before, even The Devil in the White City. I'm dying to see how Hollywood pulls this one off.
Do you know approximately when that's going to come out, Jeff?
2024.
2024.
They start production in January.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to tune into that.
Oh yeah, I think it'll be the most watched television show on Hulu ever. But we had a lot of viewers on American Ripper those final 2 episodes. So we found this concrete sarcophagus, and the story went, which I completely disagreed with. These people they were talking about how Holmes had been afraid of grave robbers, that he wanted his body left untouched over the eternity of time. All right. Well, if you knew Holmes at all and how he thought and the evil that went through his mind and how he was a pathological liar, Everything he was doing was a chess game. Everything he was doing was a poker match. And he was bluffing and lying the whole time. But what I think was there was a body in a concrete block that Holmes never wanted dug up to be identified as someone other than him.
Yeah.
And you know what? For 124 years, he succeeded. 121 years, he succeeded. And that was enough. So it was a fascinating dig. We had the University of Pennsylvania anthropologists there, the two ladies that were very talented. The engineers were there. The graves were collapsing while we were digging them, so that there were bodies on each side we had to protect. So we shored up the graves so that those bodies weren't touched. And then we had water in the bottom of the one that kept flooding the grave that we had to keep pumping out. So you can imagine how much money history was putting into the project.
Wow. Okay, I'm going to bring Amanda Lee up, and then I know Johnny had a few questions, and anybody else that have questions, we'll ask them, and then you can answer them. Let me get Amanda up here, and okay. There you go, Amanda. I'm going to try to go back because I know Johnny had, hopefully I can go back. If not, Johnny, you're going to have to, maybe. I'm going back. I think I might be able to get to him. Okay. If you guys have questions, make sure you are asking them. Everybody was saying welcome to you, Jeff. Thankful that you were here.
I love shows like yours, Allison, and I love taking questions from the listeners. I do.
Yes, and that's what I've told everybody, that you love questions. Okay. There was something I wanted. I got to find it because, Johnny did say, I think Jeff is right. Holmes had the perfect place to hide or keep people until he dumped the bodies. That's when we were talking about, did they really execute him? And Johnny agreed with you on that.
Yeah. Hello, Amanda.
Hello, how are you?
Fine. I'm enjoying Allison's show.
Well, I am so thankful that you were kind enough to come up, because like I said, we're all here because we are into true crime. So it's nice to have family. A couple weeks ago, did you ever hear of the Sodder kids that they burn up? Well, the house burnt down in West Virginia. Anyways, a lot of people think that house didn't burn. Well, it burned, but they think that there was 5 kids kidnapped. And I had the great grandson of Jenny Sodder and George Sodder on my panel too. So it's nice to be able to talk to the family because, there's so much false information. And this is what you've done for how long now, is it investigate H.H. Holmes?
Yeah, I've been working on this quite a while. I'm ready for Hollywood to take over.
Yes. Okay. Johnny says, how far do you think Holmes went to kill? Meaning, do you think he went into like suburbs?
One more time.
How far do you think Holmes went? How many miles? Do you think he went into suburbs?
You know what? He traveled all over the country. He traveled. He was in Canada. He traveled liners to England. I know history is going to be shocked to find out that we can show that he was in California. And it's going to be amazing to see how they carry the story forward.
I think the numbers, people are going to be shocked. The numbers of how many victims he really truly had.
Now, he liked to be close to those big life insurance companies because he was a capitalist. This was to make money. And that evil in him liked that heavy cash in his hand so he could dress up fancy and go to the best dinners and all that stuff. That's what he lived for.
Yeah. So, yeah, okay, that answered your question then, Johnny. So he was wondering if he traveled outside of Chicago and brought them back to his place, wondering if they felt safe at his
He was
hotel.
playing some games down in Texas. Yeah.
Pink Dahlia, they did. They destroyed the murder building, murder hotel, and now there's a post office. I can bring those pictures back up of what's there now. But part of the basement's still there, Pink Dahlia. And before you came here, Jeff actually went into that basement and he felt
I want to be careful. There is not part of the murder castle basement left. That's the post office basement, but it borders what would have been the murder castle basement.
Yes, because like you said, if the FBI, whatever, go in, there would have to be DNA of something.
You think so? You think so? It'd be fun to take a look. And I know, if we get enough interest going because of Hollywood now and who's involved, it might be that one of the big universities takes over and decides to do the right thing.
I'm going to pull up this picture, Jeff, and I want you to tell me about this picture.
Yeah.
What? I pulled this off of your Facebook page.
Well, that's the engineering shoring I was telling you about, saving the bodies on each side. That's the company that came in, and then the bottom, to the left, is the concrete block, and then the anthropologists had dug away at where the body was. I was objecting the whole time. I didn't think they were doing it the right way. I was thinking this was an American historic piece of evidence that should have been lifted out carefully and taken to one of their laboratories at the University of Pennsylvania, and then, slowly whittled away the concrete properly. The thing that I was up against, Allison, was I was the only one there that thought there was any chance this wasn't Holmes. All right. Everyone there pretty much thought this was Holmes. This was for a television show. I had written a crazy book, and let's just move ahead, put him back in the ground and do something else. Well, so they weren't careful with the DNA. They weren't careful with the dental records. They weren't careful with the height of the skeleton, the physiology, the neck vertebra, all those things. And now, when I have someone help me, and I put that on the Facebook page today, how I've got another show now that wants to back me up and go through all the evidence about what I think we found in that grave. I think the world and Hollywood is going to be shocked about what was in that grave. And I'm convinced that wasn't him. The DNA didn't match. The dental records were falsified. That's what Holmes did for a living. He falsified dental records. And that's how he got the life insurance money. The skeleton was too short. The physiology was totally wrong. The two anthropologists from the UPenn said that it was short and stout. That Holmes' body was described by physicians and the attorney at the trial as tall and thin. And then, most important of all, the one that I still can't get around, when the body was hung dropped from the scaffolding, the two physicians at Moyamensing prison examined the body. They dug the rope out of the neck. The jerk was so violent. And they actually described where the two vertebrae were separated on that neck vertebra. if you watch American Ripper, one of the anthropologists admits on the show there was no damage to the network.
Wow. Well,
And that to me, that's something you win. That's something you win a criminal trial with.
yeah.
And it's indisputable evidence. And I can't wait till I get the chance to spell out what I think actually happened, and then stand back and watch how Hollywood runs with that part of the story.
Yeah. Pink Dahlia says there are plenty of pictures where they could do facial reconstruction on the skull to show the truth too.
You know, that's true. And I've got a fabulous fan who is convinced that the pictures of the skull we have that the UPenn, took after all their work show that the lump on the side of the head wasn't the same as the pictures of Holmes before the hanging.
Yeah. Jeff, I'm going to let Amanda take over for a minute. My puppy's needing to go potty, and then I will be right back. Amanda, I had to mute you for a second because there was some kind of crackling or something. So I'm going to mute myself real quick. And I know Amanda has questions. And anybody else, Amanda, watch the chat too for me, because I want everybody, and anybody else that wants to come up, you guys are more than welcome to. Let me take Gypsy to the bathroom, and I know you guys got to have questions. So I'll be back.
All right.
Everybody hear me now with no crackle? Hello?
Amanda, I hear you.
Yeah. You hear me?
Yeah, I think, talk a little louder because he couldn't hardly hear.
Okay.
Okay.
One of the questions I had for you, if you can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Was what did you think about, if you even watched it, American Horror Story? And it was called Hotel, and a lot of it was loosely based on H.H. Holmes. Did you watch that?
I didn't watch that, Amanda. I had fans let me know that they thought it was about Holmes too.
Yeah. I mean, they have the guy that looks exactly like him, and the hotel's built up to where, he has these chambers and everything. So that's immediately what I thought was that character was, off of H.H. Holmes, which they did a good job with it. If you haven't watched it, you should.
Okay. When I see it come on, I'll give it a shot.
Yeah. And it goes off track. It's not just that, not just H.H. Holmes, but they kind of throw it in there. And that's what they do on that show. They, generally they'll bring some kind of real crime that's happened in the past, and they'll make something out of it. And that's what they did with that episode. It's or not episode. It's season 5. It's called Hotel. If you ever want to get a chance to watch it, it's pretty good. But
one of the things that's the hardest thing about, studying and getting the truth out of what happened with Holmes was he was a pathological liar. It's very difficult to find out which statements he's telling you have any truth in them whatsoever, or what pages he's writing. And I think it's almost entertaining for me. I watch some of these previous authors who write page and page about him being maybe the most prolific pathological liar in American history, but then using a statement that he made as part of their theories or concepts about how many people he killed. And you know what, Amanda, I don't know. I don't know what the truth was. All I know was this man was pure evil. And for these last few months of his life, he killed 3 little babies, a little boy and 2 little girls. Cut him up and put him in these trunks so that the authorities wouldn't catch him. And it's as terrible as it gets, no matter how many numbers it actually comes to be.
Right. So do you think how does this all tie in? Do you think he could have been Jack the Ripper?
Oh, I think he was. I think he was. But you know what I've tried to explain in my revision was, and history and we talked about this during the production,
Mhm.
was, Jack the Ripper has always been, Amanda, that there was one man and 5 victims,
Right.
maybe 6. When you investigate Holmes's time there and what I think happened, it's pretty obvious to me that there was more than one killer. There had been a copycat, and I'll give you a funny side note. While we were there in production, we were at a famous London hotel, and we'd shot all day, and the crew was down in the fire pit preparing for the next day's work, and they'd shooed me off to go get a drink up at the bar. And these 2 young gentlemen in suits and ties came walking up, introduced themselves, and then let me know that they were Scotland Yard. And they just told me that they'd been watching us during the production. They were fascinated with my theories about the American doctor having been Jack the Ripper. They wanted me to know that they didn't agree with me, but they did agree that there had been a copycat involved and that the world had had one man, 5 victims wrong the entire time.
So they think that there was a copycat person over there.
They don't have a name. They don't have an identity. They don't even have a photograph or any finger. There were no fingerprints back then. They don't have any teeth. They don't have anything to identify. They just know that it doesn't work out. And one of the things they discussed with me was that the third murder, the Elizabeth Stride murder, where supposedly she died a very quick death, and then the killer ran across town to kill the 4th one, Catherine Eddowes, which I think is the one Holmes murdered. They weren't sure that was even possible. And then they discussed the 5th murder, the Mary Kelly murder, which was the MO, the evidence, nothing was similar to any of the previous murders, and that they were highly doubtful that had been by the same man. So, there's a lot of doubt. There's a lot of, one of my fans called me the other day and said there was a Jack the Ripper show on television the other night, and there were 5 segments, and on the 5th segment, they actually brought up my theories about Holmes having been one of the suspects, and that they were highly optimistic that it could be true.
Well, the timeline might be all off and everything, but because I don't know, I can't remember the timeline. But have you ever heard that it's a possibility that he had something to do with Black Dahlia, or was that beyond his time?
I've never heard that.
You never heard the Black Dahlia?
I've heard of the Black Dahlia, but not that Holmes had anything to do with it.
Okay, I think that would have been beyond his years.
I was going to say, what year was the Black Dahlia?
I can't remember, honestly. I mean, I want to say 1930s, somewhere in there.
Yeah, that would have been, because his was 1896. Yeah, something like that.
He would have been 69, 70 years old.
Yeah.
Could have been. I don't, could have been.
Yeah, you never know.
Pink Dahlia, I should know this. Pink Dahlia says, so did he flee London and set up shop here? No, this was after. Wouldn't this have been after the murder hotel?
No, it was before. 1888.
Oh, it was before?
He started building the castle, I think, in 1891, maybe late 1890.
How long did it take for that castle? Wasn't very long for as big as it was.
I don't know exactly. I know that, they had a lot of contractors. The many contractors in Holmes had a lot of trouble. He was famous
He was
for not
fine with
having
the
paid bills he
explanation,
owed
right?
and then sending them out on some wild goose chase and then abandoning their work
Yeah.
with some of the lawyer's help that he had. But I'm not quite sure on the exact details how long it took. But I tell you what, I'm fascinated to see the images and the recreations that Hollywood comes up with when they decide to put that murder castle together. And we can all agree that's going to be the biggest part of that show.
Oh man,
Yeah.
you're right. Johnny Kramer says, "What's the chance that some of us that went to school in Chicago had a skeleton in their classroom that was sold by Holmes? You must have left, but actually, here in Iowa at the university, one of the professors thought a skeleton was from H.H. Holmes, and they took that skeleton and buried it. So it's not just Chicago; it's all over the world."
Well, it'll be more pretty soon. It'll be more
Mm-hmm.
when when there's a museum, a medical history museum, and they can't identify exactly where those skeletons came from. That's what this man did for a living.
Yeah. He dug them up and sold them, right?
Dug what up?
The skeletons,
No,
some of them.
he killed them and
Oh,
sold the skeleton body parts and stuff.
He did
okay.
both.
I
He
think
did
he dug
both.
them up
Yeah,
too.
he would actually use corpses. He had a team of he had a doctor friend in New York that helped him with bodies and transported them across the country on these plywood boxes on rail cars in order to pull off those frauds with the life insurance companies. It was quite a mechanism.
Now, did any of those people that helped, did they know what he was doing?
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Did anybody else get in trouble or?
I'm sure they got paid off, in my opinion.
I'm not quite. I would. You know what? I wouldn't be giving you an educated opinion on that. I'm sure. Maybe not. I know the one was what his trial was about, and that was one of his best assistants. That man ended up dead.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Pink Dahlia said, so the blueprints were only known by him. The blueprints of the murder hotel.
Not sure.
Yeah, because he kept moving around different workers for various reasons. You know, he never wanted anybody to know exactly what he was doing or what he was building, from what I know of.
Yeah.
So he would fire people, and I mean, even down to not paying them somehow, best I can remember. And you can chime in and say whatever you want to, but that's all my memory is of it.
Oh, he was quite charming. He was very debonair, elegant. He was quite the con. He could pull it all off. And there are stories about when the jury came back and announced that they had found him guilty, and the judge sentenced him to the ultimate. How when he stood up and he was led off by the marshals, there were women that stood up in the audience behind, crying tears about where this man they loved was going.
Well,
and those are newspaper accounts. And what I've learned, Amanda and Allison, most of all, having done all this research, were many of the newspaper accounts about Holmes in 1895, 1896 have to be looked at very, very carefully, because most of those reporters weren't even there about what they were writing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look at Chris Watts, look at all the women that are at, supposedly are in love with him and write him. I mean, a lot of murderers, Ted Bundy, look at all the women that was in love with him. Yeah. Pink
That's one
Dahlia
of the
says,
reasons why Hollywood decided to take on the devil in the White City in such a big way. There's an upset there, you know, and I'm not a psychologist. I haven't gone to school regarding any true crime uh, degrees or education, but it's pretty obvious. There is an obsession with serial killers in America. And why that is, I'm not certain. But I think the show that's coming up is going to try to tap into that obsession.
sorry, guys,
I'm
my
quite
daughter
fascinated to
told me
see
something.
how they, you know what, I have to catch myself, Allison. I have to catch myself that I stay aware that this was a terrible, evil man. And you don't start admiring some of the stuff that he pulled off. And I'm looking forward to seeing how Hollywood does that in their show.
Yeah.
They don't want to do that. They don't want to come, you know, portray him as some kind of hero. He was a monster.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
they need to remember that. That's why I'm fascinated also to see who they pick to play Holmes as the actor.
Yeah.
Pink Dahlia says the FBI says that there are currently 400 to 500 operating serial killers in the U.S. as of today, or as we speak.
Wow. I didn't know it was that many.
Isn't
Yeah,
that
that's a lot.
Johnny Kramer says that they think the Watts was a serial killer. Just saying.
What?
Who knows?
Who
Who knows? Yeah. We
Oh,
don't
yeah.
know. Nobody knows.
No, you don't.
I mean, they act like they're so, innocent, and they kill their, family. There's something wrong there.
Yeah.
There was something I was also wanting, but I can't remember what it was. Does anybody else have any questions? Charming and under the radar. Exactly, Pink Dahlia. They're definitely charming and under the radar. H.H. Holmes, he could get anybody to go in there, and they thought they were going to stay in a nice hotel, and it's just
I try to write about that in the book. The beginning of the book, how he would have been there welcoming them off their travels across country to come see the World's Fair, maybe get a job. Some young lady working there.
Yeah.
And they would have needed a place to stay, and his motel would have been recommended by the officials at the fair, and he's welcoming them there, and no one knows how many died there or he murdered, but the Chicago historians will tell you many young ladies went missing during the fair.
Yeah. Yes, Pink Dahlia. It was during the World's Fair is when a lot of people went missing.
The Chicago police will admit that. Yeah.
Yeah. Does anybody know, is the World Fair still going on?
No. It's been shut down a long time.
Yeah, they don't
You can go out and walk the area it was at.
Yeah, I've never been to Chicago.
There's no fairgrounds there anymore.
Yeah, we don't even have a carnival anymore. We have the Iowa State Fair, but we don't even have a carnival anymore. Amanda, are you still on?
I'm back now.
You're what?
I'm back now.
Okay, well, you're in the back area too. It shows. Is that you?
Yeah.
So you're up on panel, plus you're in the back.
I don't know how that works.
I don't know, but I'm not gonna. If you're still here, I'm not gonna. I don't know if somebody's using you again.
No, I just fell off.
Does anybody else want to come up and ask Jeff any questions? I would love to have you back up. And for anybody coming in, he's offering anybody here a free download to the revised, the revision of the book, Bloodstains. So if anybody
for a limited time, we're going to be offering the ebook download free on a PDF. So the website's being redesigned now. We'll have, I'm just editing out the final touches, but write down buck29 in word form, buck29.com. Keep that, and then when we're all finished, I'm going to offer that off the Bloodstains Facebook page, and I'll give you the link there, and you can run right over and then download the ebook. We're going to offer it for what?
Will you let me know when it's ready, and then I can?
Sure. Okay. We're going to offer it for free for 1 week.
Okay.
And then, you know what? We're only going to be charging $1.29. It's not like it's a huge amount of money, but it's just, the way literature is now in the book world and print copy and all those things. I learned some hard lessons about selling books, and I just love the idea of someone being able to download my book for that amount or even free, and then taking the time to reading it, and then let me know what they think as part of their read. And while Hollywood is probably producing the greatest television series ever made, and I think it's a great opportunity for an author. I'm looking forward to taking advantage of it. And I haven't been contacted by Hollywood or anything, but I'm going to have my book there available for anyone. And should they wish to take advantage of it, and while the show and the series is on, I think it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, once all of us do read the book, I want to have you back on, because I'm sure we're going to have so many more questions. I know I will. I know Amanda will. I know Pink Dahlia will. Johnny probably. I want you to come back on if that's possible.
Good. No, it'll be fun, and it's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it.
Yes. Yes. Well, does anybody else have any more questions for Jeff? If not, then I think I'm going to close it up. Amanda, you have any more questions?
No, not other than it already.
Yeah. Pink Dahlia says we'll all be hooked. We will. We will have a lot of questions, and so will Alex. Yes, Pink Dahlia. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time and visiting with us. And
yes, thank you.
You keep in touch with me, and I definitely will be keeping in touch with you. And
well, both of you, thank you very much. I had a lot of fun, and I enjoyed it. And let's keep in touch. And then, like I said, write down buck29.com, and then keep an eye on my blood. It's probably going to be in a couple of weeks. We're gonna get, for a limited time only, we're going to give you guys the chance to download it for free. I don't know of anybody else in the entire literary world that's offering that.
Well, I can tell you we appreciate it, because I know that wheels are turning already. Mine are. I know theirs are, because we all think the same.
Yeah.
So,
all right. Well, Amanda and Allison, thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night, everyone. Thank you, chat. Thanks, Mods.
Not everybody.
Bye. Anyways, Amanda, are you still on?
I'm still here.
Oh, anyways, I just want to thank everybody for being here and modding for me, and not just as mods, but as my friends, and supporting me. I really appreciate it a lot.
And mine. Yeah. I said, and just being honest.
Yes, yes. Anyways, thank you guys very much. Thanks, Amanda. I appreciate you. And
thank you.
You guys have a great night. Good night, everyone.
Good night.